life, the impact on your working life, on your leisure life, on your health, on your social care, etc., on roads, footpaths, pavements, empty in the business. Politics and democracy impacts on all of that. So having your voice, having a say, having an impact is very important, and you do that through the voting process. So I urge you all to get involved, and it's great to see you all here this morning. Also, just like welcome the panel, and Adrian will do the introductions there in a few minutes. The theme this year, in terms of Local Democracy Week, and there's always a theme, is around citizen participation, consultation and commitment for a thriving local democracy. So, just to make you aware, we are streaming this today through our YouTube page, and Kevin's in charge of that, so we're all relying on him to get the streaming right. You can tweet on hashtag NTYPOT, is that right? QT, sorry, I haven't got my glasses on, so I do struggle. So please make sure you get some tweets out, promote the event, promote democracy as you go forward. So, as I said earlier on, thank you everyone for turning up today. Whether you're asking a question, or just being part of the audience, or doing a tweet, I thank you for your contribution. Now hand over to our BBC Local North correspondent, Adrian Pitchers, who will begin with question time. Thank you, Adrian.
Thank you, Patrick. Yes, my name's Adrian Pitches, so I work for BBC Local North, which is the 6:30 regional news programme on BBC One. The project far more interesting things at that time, so encourage you to see it. The panel today is composed of people from local authority, but also with other specialisms. So, if I come from your left to right, my right to left, at the end we've got Chloe Hall, who runs her own business. She's involved in digital marketing. She owns Bundle of Bloom Media, and she's probably the closest in age to the rest of you in the room. Next to her is Councillor Ed Hodson, who's a Conservative councillor for the St Mary's ward, that's in Whitley Bay, that's St Mary's Island. I'm sure most of you have visited that at some point. Next to me here, Gwen Burke, Director of Public Health, who you've probably met at other events. Here, Robin Fry, who's from the Voluntary Organisation Development Agency here in North Tyneside, so coordinating all voluntary activity here in the borough. Next to him, Councillor Kath Davis, Labour Councillor for Preston Ward, and then at the far end, Sergeant Dave Floyd from Northumbria Police, who's from the Whitley Bay neighbourhood team. Somebody who should have been on the panel is your elected Mayor Norma Redfern, who you probably met on school visits and so on. Unfortunately, Norma slipped over and broke her arm, so she's actually got a hospital appointment today. So we wish her well. She sent a note for me to read out to you guys. She's asked that I convey her apologies, but she couldn't be here today, although it was obviously an accident. I don't think she deliberately fell over and broke her arm. But she's in hospital. She says she's disappointed not to be here because she knows that your work, the work of young people, is extremely important. You might not know that actually Norma Redfern is a former head teacher, so she's pretty well informed about the school process. She's very passionate about issues affecting children and young people. So any questions that you ask today and the answers that come from the panel will also be written up, and there's a report that you guys will see after the event. So that's will therefore she will get some input from Norma Redfern, because her answers will go into that, because she'll obviously be working on answers to the questions that she's seen in advance. Right, let's have the first question. Now, I think this comes from Mitchell Pace from Churchill Community College.
How can UK democracy be improved?
That's very succinct. Thank you very much. How can UK democracy be improved? And I'm going to start by asking Councillor Hodson to get the ball rolling on that.
Well, good morning, everybody. Winston Churchill once said that democracy wasn't a very good system, but it's the best one we know. Democracy is about the people's control of the nation's leadership. To achieve that, people have to know what they want, and then actively seek out their MPs and councillors to make their demands known. And in elections, voters can support or reject candidates on the quality of their performance. In recent times, voter strength has been illustrated by the university fee issue, which you'll all be interested in. the Liberal Democrat Party have been virtually wiped out by having once promised not to levy university tuition fees on students and then changing their minds. That is democracy working. In the last general election, the Labour Party gained massive support from young people on the promise to cancel university tuition fees and outstanding debts as well. That too is the democracy in operation. So, to answer the question, use your vote to affect policy changes and talk to your elected leaders to make known the policies you want them to support. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hodson. And sitting next to Councillor Hodson, Chloe Hall. Chloe, what's your take on this question?
Hi everyone. Now I have to admit, when I saw this question, I mean, I'm 26 years old, and democracy in politics is still something that I'm like, oh God, don't ask me a question about that, because I think for all of us sometimes, you don't necessarily understand everything, and you feel a bit silly thinking, oh, should I get involved in this? So I answered this just as a 26-year-old woman in business, and I thought UK democracy could be improved by continuing to open up policies, so arguably unpopular, but Brexit was one opportunity I think we've all recently had to have our say. And yes, I know a lot of people weren't happy with what the result was, but the fact is we had our opportunity to speak, and then that decision has now been hopefully followed through by Theresa May. So opening up policies that people can actually have their say on, but also harnessing the power of social media. So obviously Facebook's been a big thing this year, especially when I was voting. So you could click something on your Facebook page to say I voted, and it would show the rest of your friends that you had voted. So it's a little bit of peer pressure, but peer pressure goes a long way in terms of people thinking, oh yeah, I'll go vote, or I'll register next year. Things like Twitter polls and e-petitions. So you might have seen it before, where somebody wants to send a petition about something to the government. You might see them circulating on Facebook, where you can add your name and address and you can add your vote. So I think for me, that's one of the ways I like to get involved with UK democracy. And just, I suppose, inspiring non-traditional voters. Now, I hate that term, and I also think it's very stereotypical, but I suppose young people who don't vote, or working class who don't care, or stupid stereotypes like that. I think we could reach out, inspire people and empower them. And I think one of the ways a couple of examples would be outreach via video and digital advertising. So whether we have a campaign on social media that you see on your Facebook or Twitter, or whether, in those digital billboards that I know they're in the Metro Centre in Elton Square, if you saw something flash up there while you're in town with your mates. Having a presence in supermarkets and cinemas, and perhaps even schools and parents' evenings. So, for example, when your parents are coming to see your teachers at school, having something that's catered for parents to just hang around and ask questions and engage them as well, so then they can pass on that to you. And so, yeah, just a few ideas that I thought.
Thank you, Chloe. Does anybody else on the panel want to chip in?
Thanks, Adrian. Just to say that the Labour didn't say that we'd wipe out student debt. We actually said they would look at it, and so decided to correct that. Senator Hodson, thank you. Anyway, good morning as well.
What do you think, Mitchell? You posed the question. Do you have any thoughts?
I think that we should have the ability to vote at a
Yeah.
younger age.
Tell everybody with a microphone.
I think we should have the ability to vote at a younger age, because I think with things we can do at 16-year-old now, we can do at voting. But we can vote because we'll have more opportunities now, so I don't see why we can't vote as well.
That's a very good point you make, because I think in the Scottish referendum, for example, on independence, people aged 16 and above could vote in that. How many people here in the audience think that the vote should be extended to 16-year-olds and upwards? That's quite, I would say that's a majority actually. Yeah. Do you think that 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds are sufficiently well informed to vote? I guess you do. Great, thank you for that. Well, let's have the next question, because I can see that we are getting engaged in the democratic process. The next question comes from Laura Ewins from George Stephenson High School. Laura.
What are your thoughts and feelings on online safety, and what tactics can be put in place across North Tyneside to spread awareness?
Right, that's a very good question. So what are your thoughts and feelings, i.e. the panels, on online safety, and what tactics could be put in place across North Tyneside to spread awareness? Right, Councillor Davis, let's see what you think.
Right, good morning again. Yes, well, the web, it's fantastic that it's opened everything up, hasn't it? Being able to get onto the social media and things like that, and you can find out anything. It's a fantastic resource, but it also has its downfalls. And what we do is when I was your age, we just had, well, you were lucky we had a telephone basically, and we wrote letters and stuff like that. I mean, letters aren't written or anything like that anymore. But we didn't really know what we do now. And so that what it does is it does lots of good things, but it also exposes young people to not so good things as well. And I'm sure David Boy from the police will let you know about things like that. But I think we just really need to be careful about how much of ourselves we give away on the line, online, because we've heard lots of reports about young people who've been caught in some really deadly situations when they've met people and things like that online. And I think it's a responsibility of all of us to make sure that young people especially are safe when they're online. And I know that schools have filter systems and things like that, which are all really very good. But what happens as well is they get around that as well. I work with young people, and very often they're susceptible to cyberbullying. And I'm sure maybe some of you in the audience, that's happened to you. And when I was young, we just had bullying, and it finished in the playground almost, but now you've got it at 24/7. And, it's to really support young people about, how we deal with that, and what we listen to and what we don't. There's, I know the schools do lots of things to help, to support and make sure that young people, when they're using the computers online, that they're safe. But it's about extending that to the home and things like that. And I mean, now you've got telephones, so it's everywhere, isn't it? So and I know a lot of schools now don't have telephones, but wherever you are, it's there, and it's about really being making sure that you're safe, and making sure that you're following stuff like that the e-safety rules, which David Foy will go on about as well. And I mean, we can't stop bullying, but what we can do is to make sure that young people are safe, that they look at the protocols. You don't give things away. You keep changing passwords and things like that. And that that as well. Sometimes I think turn the technology off as well, and enjoy just doing ordinary things like sport and things like that, and don't have it on all the time, because I've known myself, when you start using it, it becomes infectious, and I think you've got to just really limit how much you use it. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Councillor. Show of hands again. How many people think that they could get by without their mobile phone for 24 hours? 48 hours? 3 days. Could you go for 3 days without your mobile phone? Right, we're doing very well here. We've still got at least 4 hands up. Who could go for a week without their mobile phone? Right, I'm very impressed. Do you actually own a mobile phone? Right, that shows great self-discipline. Well done. Let's hear from Sergeant Dave Foy, because clearly online safety is a big issue, increasingly taking up a lot of police time.
Yes, good morning. Yes, Laura, thanks very much for the question. It's a very salient question, because indeed we spend in the police an awful lot of time dealing with issues in and around the internet, the use of mobile phones, applications, social media apps. It affects an awful lot of people. I mean, after all, you're the generation that's grown up with the internet. It's part of your DNA, isn't it? I'm sure if it's something like my children, you seem to be permanently plugged into the internet, applications, social media, communicating, which is great. It's wonderful. It's out there. It supports you. It's a great resource. It means that you're never alone. You always have someone to talk to. But you've got to be careful that that doesn't become a controlling aspect of your lives, and also, you know, it can ruin some lives as well, as has been touched upon. And it's a fact. I mean, good old BBC did a poll recently, and they found that 20% of 8 to 11-year-olds had got an online social profile. Now that increased to 70% by the age of 12 to 15. So when you've got a social profile, you've kind of got a fingerprint on the internet. You've got a little you, if you were, a meme of yourself on the internet, which can then evolve over time. That to me seems very young, to be having a social imprint. I try and reduce mine as much as I can. But you're that generation, you're the internet generation, you fully embrace it. You haven't known anything different. And being teenagers, you kind of engage in a little bit of risky behaviour, because that's kind of what teenagers do sometimes. And in that same poll, they did a poll of 2,000 children, and they found that 50% of those, more than half, had done something risky on social media, online. Okay? So that indicates that you are engaging on the internet, but you're also engaging in some risky behaviours. Okay? Now, the fact that Laura's asked me the question indicates that she's certainly aware of the risks around the internet. So it's a great tool, but as we've said, there are risks. So the first thing is to acknowledge that there are risks. And then after that, it's what you do about it. So the appreciation, the internet's great, but there are risks. Right, what are the risks and what do we do about them? Yeah, that's the important thing. So don't be passive in the whole process of the internet. Use it, but be aware of the risks and be aware of how you manage those risks. That's the important thing. So you control the internet, because you're the internet generation. Make sure that you control it and it doesn't control you and ruin your lives. That's the important thing. Now for me, there's two aspects. There's lots of things that can go wrong on the internet, fraud, etc. But for people of your generation, for your age, the two aspects that cause me greatest concern, where I see the greatest hurt being caused, around the issues of online grooming, and that can lead to child sexual exploitation. And you might feel a bit uncomfortable about that, but that's where it leads, and also bullying. Those are the two things where I see the greatest hurt and the greatest harm that can come to individuals when they're affected by those things. Now, I'm not going to try and go through all of the safety aspects now, particularly around online grooming. That's a whole subject. It's very sensitive, and it's something that has to go into depth. And I hope you've all had some input around that, and you will have some input around that over time. But just be aware, if you're engaging with someone online and you don't know who they are other than this identity, this name they've given you, then you don't know that person. You just know a name, you just know an internet address or a tag. That's all you know. You don't know anything about them. And if that friend seems too good to be true, well, there's the clue. It's too good to be true. If they share all of your interests and they think you're great and they offer you gifts and, you know, they just always tell you how good you are online, just think very, very carefully. Just think your friends, you know, in a classroom, do they always tell you how good you are all the time, or do you fall out sometimes? Yeah? If a friend is too good to be true, it is that. And certainly never, ever arrange to meet someone who you've only met online. Never, ever. That's just a line you do not cross. Okay? Never arrange to meet someone who you've just met online or knew online, and then you arrange to meet them. Just never do that. That's a big no. I did say I wouldn't go into all of that, because it's a big, big subject in terms of personal safety, but I just want to underline those aspects. If you take nothing else away today, just take that. So that's around the issue of you know, online grooming. Be aware of it. It is an issue. And I know you're young, but it's out there. Be aware. Bullying, that's the second area. It's a biggie online. Okay? And it does affect people. It ruins lives. So cyberbullying, online bullying, it kind of, the terms that are used introduce distance, and that's already been touched upon. The idea that you can just type something online and send it, it's gone, it's in the ether. You're not doing it face to face, like what happened in the school playground back in my day. You know, it just, you can send it, it's almost anonymous, there's no immediate impact. But the most invidious thing, the worst thing about online bullying is the fact it can reach into the home. Just where you're supposed to be safe and secure. You're sat in your bedroom, you're sat with your family, you're watching television, and something pops up on your screen. Yeah? And there's your evening ruined. So really think carefully. If you're the person sending the message, think, would I say to them to the face? Would I let other people know I'd said that? And think also about the impact on the individual. If you're reaching at home, it might seem funny, you might not really intend it, but they don't know that because they don't see the context in which the message is sent. So think very, very carefully about online bullying, the impact it has. Okay? It's a great responsibility, great resource, but a great responsibility, the internet. So, if you're a victim of online bullying, just make sure you tell someone. I know it's hard to admit that, but the first stage is always to recognise you're being bullied, but then to tell someone about it. A friend, an adult, parent, carer, teacher, policeman. Just tell someone, yeah? And if you don't want to tell someone face to face, you can do it online, yeah? There's a Northumbria Police website. There's also Childline. There's also CEOPS. And that's a government website that's linked to the National Crime Agency. And this is how serious we treat online bullying, stalking, harassment, and other such crimes, nurturing online. So CEOPS, C-E-O-P-S. Just type that in on Google or any other application, and it will pop up, and there's an online reporting system on there. And there's also lots and lots of guidance, as there is on the Northumbria Police website. Okay? So the resources are out there. There's lots of input coming from the police, from schools. And I know part of the question was, how do you spread awareness? Well, actually, what about yourselves? If you're forever, like I've just been here lecturing you, and you're thinking, oh, probably rolling your eyes, there's the police going off again. Actually, you, yourselves, you're the best messenger. Yeah? You look out for each other, and you tell each other about safety. I mean, you make that part of your DNA, how you operate on the internet. You're the best messengers. You're the best people to spread the word around safety.
Some very, very wise words there, some brilliant advice from Sergeant Boyd. Thank you for that, that was excellent. Robin, you're involved in volunteering right across the borough. What's your perspective?
Okay, so before I talk about my work perspective, so I've got an 8-year-old daughter who will be going to Valley Gardens School next year. She's in year 4, so this whole idea of e-safety totally terrifies me, and I think the temptation is possibly to not allow her to engage with any kind of social media for fear of all the horrible things that might happen. And the school that she goes to does a great job, and they've already started talking to the students about internet safety. And it's, I guess for me, it's finding that balance in terms of I'm aware of what social media can offer in terms of communication, creativity, and I want her to be able to take advantage of that. And I think there's a lot of things you as young people can do to keep yourselves safe, but equally there's a lot that we can all do as well. And I think one of the key things for me as a parent, but also as someone who works with young people, is to stay up to date and to realise and to keep in touch with things, because things move so quickly. Which is why often at home I'll find myself playing on Roblox, Minecraft, purely because I'm trying to keep up to date with social media. And so the organisation I work with, we do a lot of work with local charities and local community groups. So at the moment we're pulling together some training around child sexual exploitation, because one of the key things is for people who work with young people to be aware of some of the signs of CSE, and also how to respond and how to support young people who might be involved. So we work with Bernardo's quite a lot, who do some great work. And last year I had the opportunity to work with 5 young females who were all at risk of getting involved in quite risky relationships. And I worked with those 5 young women to create a short animation called Behind the Screen. And it was their words and it was their story, and it was similar to the kind of thing that Dave was talking about there, about that temptation to fall for people online who seem to be giving you a lot of compliments, who seem to be trying to get you away from your friends and family, and how that can leave people in quite a vulnerable position. But those young people were determined not to make an animation that kind of terrified everyone, and also not necessarily to make an animation that told people what they should or shouldn't be doing. Because I think sometimes one of the worst things you can do is tell people, or whatever you do, don't do that, because that sometimes makes people quite curious. But I think that peer education of young people who maybe have been quite vulnerable, sharing their story with others, so that you can make your own decisions based on the facts of what you think is appropriate and what isn't appropriate. In terms of the cyberbullying, very aware of that. There's some great work being done by a local charity called LD North East, and their mission is to support people with learning disabilities. And some of the hate crime directed at people with learning disabilities is absolutely, it's just incredible, and more it's becoming an online thing. So they're doing some great work for professionals to learn a little bit more about what are the signs of hate crime and what are the best ways of reporting hate crime. And I think we're starting to see far more people being able to report hate crime now. A lot of my work is working with young people, so the organisation I work for, we run the National Citizen Service Programme for 16-year-olds. So over the summer we had just short of 200 young people involved in an out-of-school programme, and bullying is something that crops up time and time again, and that fine line between what I see as bullying and someone else passes off as banter, and we've got a very clear policy, and I hope that your schools have a very clear policy around bullying and how they can quickly and effectively deal with it. And I think one of the key things is to get your voices heard on that, because you need to own that policy, because you're the ones who are going to be seeing it happen, and you're the ones who can take some action. So for me, in my position professionally, it's about ensuring that people who work with local charities have got the knowledge, the expertise, and have got the links into the local authorities' safeguarding teams, so that they can support you. And I think all of the work we do is to help you become a bit more resilient as well. I think the better you feel about yourselves, the more able you'll be to take action on things and to be able to spot those things that you feel are inappropriate. And organisations like Bernardo's, DePaul, smaller organisations like Phoenix Detached Youth Project, there's a lot of charities working with quite vulnerable young people to get them to the point where they'll be quite confident to tell someone, actually, no, you can't do that to me, or that behaviour isn't appropriate, and they can start reporting it. And I think getting people to that level where they've got respect for themselves, I think is one of the key things we can do.
Again, some fantastic advice there. You mentioned this animation behind the screen, Robin. Where can young people find that access?
So the animation is online, and it's been used by some school and youth groups as well. But it would be great to get the link out to some of the schools as well, so people can watch it.
Well, I think we can do that using the technology that we're using today. Let's just briefly go back to Laura. Obviously, like any responsible young person, I'm sure you know how to keep yourself safe on. Have you ever felt unsafe online, and what steps have you taken to protect yourself, Laura?
Well, I haven't really felt totally unsafe because my parents check my phone often and see what I'm doing and make sure that I'm not speaking to anyone or people are liking my photos or anything that I don't know. But I do think that people need to know that if they get a message from someone that it's wrong and they shouldn't message them because they don't know who they are, and that they need to stay safe and tell the parents that they've been messaged, even if it's just an innocent message saying hi, that it could lead to something more dangerous.
Brilliant. Well, that's very, very wise. And indeed, as the panel have said, you look out for each other. Don't just rely on adults to do it. Thank you for that. That was a really good question. I think some really good answers there as well. Right, our fourth question comes from Scarlett Mumby, who's at Norham High School. Microphone's heading your way, Scarlett.
Why did they build more houses instead of places for children to play?
I think I've jumped the gun and I've jumped it. But that's okay, because we'll come back to Neve's question. Sorry, Neve, your question will be answered. Sorry, ask that again, Scarlett.
Why did they build more houses instead of less places for children to play?
Well, that's an extremely good question. Why do they build more houses but fewer places for children to play? So we're going to hear from Councillor Ed Hodgson and we're going to hear from Wendy Burke, and then we're going to go back to Neve's question. Sorry, I jumped across it, but Councillor Hodgson.
Okay. There are already many rules about planning of new housing estates and the provision of recreation spaces. North Tyneside Council has recently finalised a local plan in which thousands of houses are to be built in the borough over the next 20 years. Recreation spaces are included in that plan. The additional houses are required for the increasing national population and its changing lifestyles, at the dictation, though, of the national government, where we've been obliged to provide for many more houses over the next 20 years. The local plan has been the subject of real disagreement amongst the public and the political parties in the council, and there remains strong feeling about the quantity of houses to be built and the placement, where they're to be placed in the borough. A major consideration of the local plan has been the ability of young people to afford a house in the future. And it is hoped that the house building programmes will make houses more affordable again in the future. Much work, though, is needed in this matter, and you're probably aware of the tremendous discussion that's going on in Parliament about this. Concerning additional play areas, I would advise you, as I did in the first question, to speak to your local councillors and perhaps your MPs and press them to get your requirements built into the council's forward plan and judge them on what they achieve for you. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Wendy Burke, obviously places to play, it's all about health, and that's very much your remit.
It is indeed. Good morning, everybody. So, one of the first things I would say is that people do want to live in North Tyneside. North Tyneside is a really great place. It's a great place to live, it's a great place to go to school, and it's a great place to work. So people want to come here, so we've got to have houses for people to live in. And we know the population's getting bigger because people are living longer, which is great news. People are living longer because, you know, they're healthier, and we've got great technology, and we've got a great NHS. We've got a lot of people living on their own. So it's really, really important that we've got enough affordable housing across the borough. And the reason that housing is really important is because actually, in terms of your own health and well-being as you get older and as you become an adult, actually housing is having a house and having a roof over your head is one of the key important factors for being healthy and well as you get older. So having a home, having a job, and being connected to your community are the three key important things in terms of your health and well-being. So, and we want you, when you become adults, to be able to, you know, one, afford a house, and also for there to be plenty of houses there. But I do agree, as a Director of Public Health, I agree that play is really important. And I'm an advocate of play. I think it's really important that young people are outdoors, because it's good for your physical health, it's good for your emotional health, it reduces stress, it can lift your mood, and it generally just makes us feel better. So we've been doing a lot of work with the developers of the kind of proposed new housing that Ed talked about, and we've been kind of raising the importance of having green space in those developments, and also having places to play for young people. So that's critically important. But I think it's also important to remember in North Tyneside that actually we've got some fantastic open space. If you just have a look at the coastline, look at the beaches that we've got, and for most of us who live in North Tyneside, even if you live the furthest point away up in the northwest, actually getting to the beach is relatively easy for most people. So we've got great beaches, we've got great wagon ways, we've got great parks. If you have a look at some of the investment that's been put into some of our parks, like Northumberland Park, we've got skate parks, we've got BMX parks. So actually there's a lot of facilities. We've got the Shiremoor Adventure Playground. So I think it's important to remember, while people do want green space on their doorstep, we've got some fantastic facilities across the borough that really we need to encourage young people to access and to use.
Thank you for that, Wendy. Scarlett, what did you think about those answers that you heard? Did they answer your question, or did they just fudge it, do you think?
They answered my question. I sort of agree with both because I think it's very important that people have a house to live in, and instead of living on the streets, and it'll be good if everyone could have a house. But I also think it's important that more children can get out and about, and instead of just sitting and playing on their Xbox or phone or tablet.
Do you get to the beach? Do you get to the beach, as Wendy suggests?
I can't really get to the beach because my dad and my mum work, and the only time I get to see my dad is on a Sunday, and he's the only one who can drive.
Okay. Do you use the parks?
Yes, there's one right outside my school, and there's one up the street from my house.
Great, good stuff. Thank you very much for that. It was a great question. We'll go back to Neve now, and apologies again. So Neve Ross from Valley Gardens Middle School, let's hear your question.
How will you ensure that young carers in our area get the correct support needed to have a good education and allow them to take their mind off things at home?
Okay, the question was, how will you ensure that young carers in our area get the correct support needed to have a good education and allow them to take their mind off things at home? We've just heard from Wendy, so I'm going to give her a brief break. We'll come to her at the end. First of all, I'll ask Chloe.
That is a good question. Now, I want to add a quick disclaimer before I share my answer, because I left school in 2009, Thomas was sixth form. So nice ties, by the way, an improvement since when I was there. So things might have changed since I was there. So I've answered this as best I can. So sorry if it's a bit out of date and you'd be thinking, what's she talking about? Unfortunately, in the last year, I have actually found myself a young carer. So I work with my mum to look after my little brother, who has mental health issues. So for me, this is quite a topic that's quite close to my heart. So to ensure carers get the right support, well, I wonder what the teachers are doing nowadays. And again, this might be out of date, but I wonder whether training around kind of empathy and understanding of what the kids go through. So for example, I run my business, I work all over the UK, and sometimes when I've got to go away and leave my brother, or I've got to leave him in the care of my mum, and I think, oh God. And actually, as a total sub story, my mum is currently undergoing cancer treatment, so she's poorly as well. And I get this, even now, I still get this kind of stress of like, oh God, who's going to look after everybody? It's going to be me, but I've got this to do. And I wondered whether, if that was me when I was at school, I wonder whether there would have been a teacher who I could have gone to and said, oh, I'm really struggling. I don't have time to do my homework, but I really want to do my homework because I don't want to fall behind. So again, if there's any kind of training out there for teachers to be understanding and flexible about, kids, because I was a total geek at school, I loved school. So I wanted to do my homework, I wanted to do well, and the thought of getting into trouble, it would have put so much extra pressure on me. And again, it's just flexibility around homework and school hours. Now, to some people who think, oh God, you want to start school at 9:30. Well, let's say, for example, if a young carer has been up most of the night looking after somebody, they're tired, they need time to sleep, have their breakfast, do what normal kids do in the morning. They might have to walk the dog. And imagine having to do all of that in about 40 minutes when, you've had 2 hours sleep or whatever. So I think having flexibility about when you go to school or what you do at school and how your homework is set, it would be a good idea. Whether it's possible in the near future, I don't know, because it's probably one of those things where you'd have to have a lot of discussions. And again, I suppose working with the whole class to destigmatise being a young carer. So it's still the case now, with some of my friends, you want to keep up with what your friends are doing. If they're going out or they're doing something or they've got the latest trainers, whatever, you want the same. It's just natural, and I'm afraid it doesn't really get any different as you get a bit older. But I suppose if the whole class understood that when you go home, you might have to help your sister do whatever, or your mum, or whatever, if the whole class knew that you were a little bit different in the way you go home, that's okay, because it destigmatises that you're different. You can't just go home and hang out with your mates and play on the Xbox because you've got to do various different things. And I think having maybe a buddy system with other young carers or other people who've got like special needs outside the house is always good, because it's always good to be like to see somebody who looks a bit like you, whose life is a bit like yours, so you don't feel as weird or you don't feel like you're missing out on stuff. And the last thing I want to say was, again, maybe with this buddy system or something at school, having something in place where if you are going on a school trip away, if you're going skiing, we went to Disneyland in sixth form, if that's still a thing, having something in place where you don't have to worry about the person you care for being cared for while you're away. Does that make sense? And I think school could play a huge part in this, because you spend so much of your life at school and a lot of time worrying about your exams or getting your homework done, or even just having your uniform clean for school the next day. I think having sort of some kind of empathy around what you're going through, and that you're not a slacker or you don't care about your work, but actually you've just got a lot on, and still being able to be a normal kid. I think hopefully that would be something that would help.
Thank you, Chloe. That was really interesting, really from the heart. Wendy, you're Director of Public Health. What's your take on this?
Okay, thanks. Great question. So there are around, well, it's estimated that there are around 700,000 young carers in the UK today. And of course, we really don't know, because a lot of young carers just get on with their role and their responsibility, and they do it, and we often don't even know that they've got that caring responsibility. So I think, while we've got those numbers, I think they're probably an underestimate of the number of young people who are out there caring. So we estimate that for North Tyneside, it's the figure's somewhere in the region of maybe 800 young people across the borough. And some people say that as many as 1 in every 12 young person in a secondary school will be a young carer. So actually the numbers are big. So we do need to take this seriously. And we know that if you're a young carer with that responsibility, that you often miss out on opportunities that other young people take for granted. Trying to juggle your education and your caring responsibility can actually cause quite a lot of pressure and stress, as Chloe's alluded to. We know that young carers' health and well-being suffers because of their caring responsibilities. They can become tired, not eat properly, often not have time for themselves to do physical activity, and we know their emotional well-being can suffer too. And I think that's something that I'm really concerned about as Director of Public Health, in terms of just making sure that there are some support services out there for them. I think Chloe's right. I think schools have got a huge role to play, and I think she articulated that really well. And I think we've got some mental health services in the borough that I think could be better at supporting our young carers' needs, and I think there's some work to do around that. I also think that we need to promote the Carers Centre in North Tyneside that actually has a young carers project, and I think that's an important source of support. And I guess we need to make sure that schools are aware that that support is there for young people, so that they can encourage them to use that sort of support. I think we have a responsibility to try and identify any young person who's a carer, and again, I think probably the best place to do that is in school, and try and make sure that they're getting the support that they need. So I think really important, I think thinking about who those young carers are, and thinking about what more we can do across the borough to provide greater support.
Thank you, Wendy. And Councillor Davis.
Thanks, Adrian, and thanks, Niamh, for your question. It's a really good question. When I was 9, I used to go and stay with my grandma at night time. Well, my granddad worked in the shipyard, and she had multiple sclerosis, so she needed somebody with her. I mean, in those days there wasn't like the facilities we've got now, so I was there, and I didn't realise I was obviously being a young carer. And like Wendy's just said, I think there's a lot of young people who don't realise, because they just do it because it's your family and you love them, and you just that's the way it is. And I think and I know sometimes I used to like miss out on things, but I didn't think I was missing out, because I was just helping out, and that was how I thought of it. but really young carers do a fantastic job. That and they're sort of unsung heroes. They're doing things like, evening sitting with a relative who's maybe got a disability, or talking to somebody, like Chloe said, like who've got mental health problems, who really that just need somebody. And just washing up, doing the housework. I mean, that's quite alien in my house, where I had teenagers who didn't do any washing up or anything like that. But that it's it's just that these young people do. They just care, and they carry on with things, and they try to fit everything in as well. And I think, like Wendy said, it's really good that we should really identify it in schools, and maybe there's somebody in schools who they can go to and just sort of have a chat with and say, listen, I'm finding it difficult to get my homework on time because I've been having to sit in with my mum or my dad or whatever, or my sister, and just to explain that that they need just that extra little bit of empathy and maybe of time to get on and do the things that everyone else is doing. Like Wendy said, there is a Young Carers website, and they do things like that. They'll listen to young people. They'll also make sure that their family gets support and things like that. And they'll also, which is really good, they'll find activities for young people to go on, so you can meet other young carers and go off and do something really fun with them, so that you've got somebody else who's in the same situation, which I find is a really good way of like getting through things. Okay.
Thank you for that. Well, there was some great testimony there from people that really have had the experience of being young carers in their lives as well. That was a great question, Neve. Is this an area that's important to you? Is that why you posed the question?
Yeah, my mum has ME, which means she has like muscle fatigue, so often I've got to push her around places or take her, so there's limited things that I have to do to help her out around the house or around in other places. So yeah, that's one of the reasons that I've asked the question, and I think it needs to be identified.
And do you think your school has taken that into account as well?
Yeah.
That's good to hear. Thank you. That was a brilliant question. Thank you very much. Our fifth question of the morning comes from Lee Bishop, who's at John Spence High School.
Given the current security issues in London and elsewhere related to extremists, what steps have been taken and could be taken to reassure the public within North Tyneside, including an increased police presence in areas other than the city centre of Newcastle?
Okay, thank you, Lee. So obviously we're living in testing times. We've seen a number of terrorist incidents across the country this year. It's very unsettling for all of us, young people and older people. Dave Ford.
Yeah, Lee, thanks very much for the question. Yes, obviously the most recent incident we've had was obviously on the tube system in London in September 15th. And on that date, obviously went to critical, or shortly afterwards we went to critical state of alert. So what immediately happens when we get that state of alert in terms of reassurance is you will notice, as you touched upon, police, particularly armed police, being at key locations within the whole of Northumbria, in fact the whole of the country. Now in Northumbria, clearly Newcastle has a lot of iconic sites, but so too does North Tyneside. And you get the same service in North Tyneside that there would in Newcastle. So armed police go to the key locations, to the key events that are going on, to make sure to reassure the public, first and foremost, that the police are there, that we're there to protect you, and that we're aware of this event or this location, and to be vigilant and to be aware of any threats that might be there. Indeed, on that weekend, I came into work, and I took my team, we stopped all our usual business. I'm not armed, but we're uniformed police officers. We're there to protect and serve our public. So we were out immediately. We went straight onto the metro system. Clearly, the events that happened in September on the tube, we wanted to make sure that people understood that our metro system, a fantastic system, is safe to use, and to encourage people to be on there and to have police officers in uniform and Nexus staff there to reassure the people that normal business will continue, and they do have the support of the police there should they need it. That's the immediate response. That's what happens, and that's sustained for as long as is necessary. Once the alert state changes, then the level of activity is reduced, but the vigilance isn't. You will still notice when you go into Newcastle and when events go on now, we do have more armed police than we did previous to the alert states being raised. There's been what we call an uplift in the number of armed police officers. That's because we've recognised we need to have a good response. We've got a big space in Northumbria, fantastic landscape, but there's big areas to be covered. So that means we need lots of extra police officers who have the capability with firearms to respond very quickly to events. Okay, so our style, our training, the number of officers who are armed is uplifted so that we can have the appropriate response 24/7, 365 days a year. Okay, so it doesn't matter if everybody else is off on a bank holiday, we're vigilant, in fact more vigilant on a bank holiday. Okay, so that's the immediate response and the continuing capability that we've got around any threats from terrorism. There's a medium-term response as well, particularly after Manchester, and I think that kind of touched upon a lot of people more in the North East than a lot of the incidents which tend to be sometimes in London and sometimes therefore feel a little bit more distant. Manchester, I think, had a little bit more impact in the North East, particularly because some of the victims were young and some of them were from the North East as well, so kind of it came a bit more real to people. And there were some youth groups who approached us because children, youths were a bit anxious about the impact, about the risks. So we've been into schools, we've been into youth groups where requested to give reassurance and understanding of what the threat is. So that's kind of what we do medium term as well. But be aware that actually around terrorism and threats of any sort of violence, intelligence is the key. We're always working away. You know, threats, we're gathering intelligence, information, and then acting upon it. The most important thing is prevention. Okay? And that's where the public come in, because it's the public who give us information. People like yourselves, if you notice something in your neighbourhood which is strange, yeah, strange activity, strange goings on, someone who's different in some way, you're concerned about the behaviour, it's up to the public to report those things to us so that we can prevent incidents happening. That's the most important thing. Okay? So there are always mechanisms to report things. You can call 101 if it's urgent, 999, or you can go to the government website, and if you just type in gov, then you will find a website where you can report, gov, you can report anything suspicious. And that will go into the systems and it'll be evaluated. Okay? That's how British policing works. It's with consent, it's in participation with yourselves. Okay? So that's the intelligence thing. And recently as well, training. I've touched upon the uplift in the firearms officers, better capability, but also we test ourselves every now and again with exercise. And in fact, last week there was a large exercise. It lasted for 3 days. Now, you may or may not have seen some of the activity, some unusual activity, but it started in Scotland. It was testing our cross-border capability. So we simulated an incident in Scotland, okay, a completely different police force, but we border it in Northumbria. We go all the way up to Berwick. So it tested our capability. An incident then came across the borders and lasted for 3 days. And it involved all the agencies, fire service, ambulance, all the local authorities, and tested their response. That's what we're doing all the time in terms of making sure that we can respond and protect and reassure our community. I hope you're a bit reassured by it.
Thank you very much, Sergeant Foy, for that. Robin Fry. Okay, great question, big question. And I think the work of the police that Dave's been speaking about is incredible and really commendable. One thing that concerns me is, whilst totally acknowledged there is a threat out there, I get concerned about this kind of culture of fear that's preventing people from going about their daily lives or making them feel unsafe on the way to school. And for me, one of the things contributing to that is some of the irresponsible journalism that I think has gone on during some of these terrorism events, where certain kind of media outlets, not yourself of course, have really kind of jumped on some of these threats to try and get some good stories and to sell more newspapers. And we've got all this kind of fake news, people retweeting stuff, reposting things on Facebook without questioning whether they're actually true or not. And I was delighted actually when my daughter came back from school last year, when she was in year 3, to say they'd been learning about fake news as part of their lesson. They've been learning to actually question things, which I think is really key. And I think it is the responsibility of schools, youth groups and parents and others to, at an age-appropriate level, to engage in conversation with young people about terrorism, because again, it's one of those things that the temptation is to just not talk about it and hope it goes away. But I think the more that we can be encouraging people to think quite critically about these things, to be looking at the facts, to be asking questions and developing their own opinions about things rather than just necessarily accepting what they see in the news, what they see on Facebook, or actually sometimes what they hear at home. In my job at Voda, I've been lucky enough to work with a local charity based in Wallsend called Working With, and they do a lot of activities supporting refugees and asylum seekers. And through some workshops they've delivered, we've been able to allow young people to have that opportunity to challenge some of those preconceptions they might have had about the threat posed by different people who are considered to be kind of outsiders. And I also have attended a short training session on radicalisation. So this concern that particularly young people are being targeted by others and are starting to take on the kind of extreme views that we probably don't welcome in North Tyneside. And it was interesting to find out that the young people who are most at risk of becoming radicalised are those people who are some of the most vulnerable people in the area. So those people who maybe don't feel accepted, those people who are looking for a kind of new friendship group, and maybe feel like the community isn't welcoming them. And I think there's a lot that we can be doing around that, so ensuring that those people who are feeling vulnerable are supported in the correct kind of way. So some of the kind of youth organisations in North Tyneside do some great work with those vulnerable people, just to try and bring them back into the community, to make them feel valued and to give them a sense of belonging so they don't have to look elsewhere. And it's kind of similar to some of the e-grooming as well, that they need to be given that support by our organisation so that they're not looking for acceptance elsewhere. But I think for me, one of the crucial things is, whilst all of this is in the media, I think it's important that we don't lose sight of all of the people doing good. So in North Tyneside, we've got over 25% of the population engaging in volunteering, doing positive things for the local community. And they very rarely appear on the front page of the newspaper. But there's so many people doing good things that I think we need to be aware of that rather than seeing everyone as a threat or being overly concerned.
Thank you very much, Robin. It was Lee that posed the question. Where is Lee? Do you feel more worried about incidents like we've seen in London or Manchester? How do you feel living in North Tyneside at the moment?
I feel quite safe, but I think I'd feel more safe if there was a lot of armed police around. Not too much, because I'd feel a bit intimidated, but I'd like to see a couple around, like North Shields and more local areas.
Right, we'll pass that on to Sergeant Foy, and he can inform his colleagues.
I hear what you're saying, and you know, and we do. Where there's an event, you know, there's something maybe going on at the Priory or something like that. We put police there. It's all about proportionality and getting that fine balance between creating fear but giving reassurance where it's appropriate. And I know certain times when it's critical, then you would have people there, but we've got to keep it proportionate to the risks so that normal life continues and you have a sense of normality. That's really important too.
So we'll have a show of hands. Compared with this time last year, how many people feel perhaps less safe than they did this time last year? Right, that's very honest. Thank you for that. Great question, Lee. Right, our next question comes from Jake Fitzpatrick. He's at St Thomas More. What's your question, Jake?
Reports show that 27% of young people believe that negative stereotyping is the biggest issue surrounding youth in the UK. What do you think of us?
So, Jake's question. Apparently, reports suggest that 27% of young people believe that negative stereotyping about young people is the biggest issue surrounding youth. So what does the panel think of young people? Brenda?
Thank you. Well, I don't think stereotyping is helpful, and I think the stereotyping that we've got at the moment demonises young people. I think whether it's kind of Harry Enfield's creation of Kevin the teenager and Andy's statement of it's not fair, or whether it's statements around young people doing better in education because it's easier, I just think they're not helpful, and I also think they're not true when we look at the hard evidence. Personally, I make my judgments based on actual experiences, and I have to say I really admire and respect our young people. That includes all of you in the audience. I know the challenges that young people face, the new social, academic, personal pressures that actually neither I or many of us sitting on the panel today had to address when we were younger and when we were growing up. I also think that actually adults need to remember that they were also young once, and that actually being a young person is a tricky job. So I think that's really important. So I think, you know, while young people are often made out to be boozing and smoking and generally being a layabout, actually the evidence tells us today that many young people are healthier, they're better educated than they were in the past, and actually young people are smoking far less and drinking far less alcohol than they were 10 or 20 years ago. And I think those trends are really encouraging. So me and my team work really closely with young people and with Vicky and Julia in the engagement team. And I've just constantly been impressed by the energy, the tenacity, the passion and the commitment. And I think, you know, when we look at some of the things that young people have produced in the borough, like the Mind Your Head lesson plan, and they've stood up in front of head teachers, and they've talked about what's important in terms of mental health, I just think that is fantastic. And actually, you know, some of that work's been highlighted nationally. I think if you look at the work of the young mayor and our youth council, I was at the youth council debate on Tuesday, and I was just spectacularly impressed at how articulate and how confident our young people are. And I think that's it's a great example of local democracy week of how active many of our young people are in North Tyneside. So I think we need to challenge those stereotypes, and I think we also need to recognise the often unseen contribution of our young people across our communities, and we should be celebrating them.
Excellent. Here, here. Sergeant Foy, is negative stereotyping the biggest problem confronting young people? What do you think of young people?
Pretty wonderful, really. I always see the best in people. That's my default position until I get evidence to prove otherwise. People might assume, because I'm a police officer, I'm cynical and will base my judgment on the negative experiences. It's not the case. Any good police officer will always look at the individual in front of them, how they present themselves, what they've done, what they say, what they do. Yeah, that's how you make judgments about people. Stereotypes, it's all about assumptions, isn't it? It's just about making about judgments about people when you don't actually know them or anything about them. So stereotyping is a very, very negative thing. Okay, always, get to know individuals, then make your judgments. Don't make your judgments first. And it's true, the youth too often get very short shrift. A lot of it comes from media. Sorry, Jeff, I was going about the media, but the media do often put out negative stereotypes around children. The vision of the hoodie, the group of 10 youths at the play park, clearly must be up to something, etc., etc. It's not always true. We get a lot of calls in the police from people concerned about youths. They'll be saying, well, there's a group of youths, they're on the play park, they think they're taking drugs, think they're, drinking alcohol, that sort of thing. So, myself and my team, it's what we do, it's our bread and butter. We'll go and we'll engage with the youths. And quite often, they're not drinking. There's no drugs. There's nothing going on. They're just a group of youths on a field doing something. And really, it's about education, and it's a two-way street, yeah? Respect, it's a two-way street. It was a campaign that Northumbria Police did a few years ago. You probably have no awareness of that. But it was around about the idea about perceptions, about people who are complaining, understanding youths and their issues and their lifestyle, and vice versa, the youths understanding the impact of their behaviour and the perceptions of the adults normally. Okay, so we will turn up and we will engage with youths in a play park, find that actually doing anything, they're just there, they're gathered, being social. That's great, kids out, that's what we want to encourage, kids going out to play, especially in the day of the internet and all of the distractions around the Xbox and other games which are available. So, yeah, it's not all negative. What we do in that scenario is, I hope, and I do with my team, we engage with the youths, point out maybe it's the impact or the perception around their behaviour. They're in a very large group. Sometimes we get groups of up to 40 or 50 youths, because social media lets you do that very quickly. You can communicate and say, let's meet so-and-so. So people do feel anxious, especially on housing estates. So we kind of point out with the kids, yeah, you're not doing anything wrong, but just think about the impact of 50 youths might intimidate people. But vice versa, we'll go back to the individuals complained and we'll say to them, yeah, the youths are there, they're not drinking, they're not smoking, there's no evidence of that. We'll just explain that we've spoken to the youths, and we'll ask the youths, you maybe need to splinter off into smaller groups and arms, just so that people aren't intimidated. Two-way street, yeah? About mutual respect from everybody. And if everybody does that, I'm sure we'll get along a lot better, so that we can break down those stereotypes. That's a really important thing, breaking down those barriers that exist, those preconceptions. All in all, I think youth are wonderful, especially those I see, the police cadets, the TVLV, and the Volunteer Life Brigade, who come out and help us when we're doing rescues on the coast, and then the youth groups and when we go into schools. As I said, I always like to see the best in people until I'm proven otherwise. And I don't often get proven otherwise. I think you're right.
Thank you very much, Sergeant Foy. We all do on this panel. We all think young people are great. Jake, do you feel that there's a negative stereotype towards young people?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think so, and I think it can affect kind of not only young people's confidence, but also their kind of motivation to do well, to kind of prove the stereotype wrong. And so I definitely agree. I think challenging and educating those stereotypes will definitely help.
Good stuff. Excellent. Right, well, our next question comes from Esme Arnold, who's at Marden High School. Esme.
What can be done to ensure young people are taught more life skills in school, such as learning about paying taxes and buying a house?
That's a very good question. What can be done to ensure young people are taught more life skills in school? Robin Fry.
Okay, great question. I'm going to cheat a little bit on this one because I suppose my thought is it's not necessarily the schools who should be seen to be doing that. I think the schools have got a part to play in it. And again, some of the organisations that we support, so local charities, youth groups, community groups, have got a huge amount to offer in terms of those kind of lessons that can't be learned in school. So one example of that would be the National Citizen Service Programme, so a national programme for 16-year-olds leaving year 11, 4 weeks over the summer. And a lot of the aims of that programme is to help people prepare, I guess, for the next step. So in North Tyneside, we've just had 200 young people during the summer take part in that programme. And some of the activities we do on that programme are very much about life skills. So the young people spend a week living in a halls of residence at Northumbria University. And on day one, they've got to work in their teams to create a shopping list and a meal planner for that week. So each group of 15 young people gets £200 and they've got to decide what meals are they going to cook that week. They've got to make a shopping list and then off they go around various markets, a little bit of bartering with the support of staff to buy stuff. And it's interesting, I guess, touching on some of the previous conversations, there's some young people who are very, very good at that. And sometimes it is those young people who at home have a caring responsibility and doing the shopping is just one of the things that they do. But there's others, it's just hilarious to follow people around supermarkets who maybe that isn't their day-to-day activity. And often, it never goes terribly wrong, but often there's just little things that don't quite work out. But we're offering that safe environment, so if they've spent all of the money on fresh stuff on the Monday and it's all gone off on the Wednesday, they don't starve for the rest of the week. But there are quite a lot of lessons to be learned. So we do that in quite a fun, engaging kind of way. We bring in local businesses as well who can talk about employment, can talk about taxes, and we do it outside of the school environment. So I think the school's got loads to offer, but and there's a lot of other voluntary organisations out there who can also offer support along the way. So for me, the key thing is for the schools and the voluntary sector to be engaging together, to look at collectively what can we offer, and to be working with young people to find out what the needs are.
Very good, thank you very much. Councillor Hodson, should more life skills be taught in school or beyond school, in fact?
Well, I agree with a lot of what Robin's just said. First of all, I agree that knowledge of life skills is essential in this day and age, and that training is required. However, there is so much to learn in the few years you are at school, where students are introduced to a massive introductory knowledge of a wide range of subjects, where students are introduced to a wide range of stuff, so you read that again, and they acquire knowledge over a wide range in which to base their fulfilling life and career. There's lots to do in schools, and there's not a lot of time to do it. I wonder if there's time in the curriculum to add further studies, especially some that you might not require for several years ahead. I don't think many 16-years are planning to buy a house, for example. Perhaps life skill courses could be given outside the school curriculum in the summer break, for example.
Very good. Well, indeed, and the National Citizenship Service is something that is offered during the summer months, and it's also very, very valuable. Councillor Davis, what's your take on this?
Thank you, Adrian. Thank you, Esme. It's a really good question. What can be done? I mean, I think schools do a tremendous job anyway, teaching life skills. Like, we're all sitting here in critical thought, doing, like, listening. And I mean, this is fantastic because you're all engaging in, like, thinking about things like this to start with. But I think I agree with Robin. It's a whole thing. It needs to be school and home and things like that. I mean, how many of you got bank accounts? Yeah. You know, it's things like that. Managing a bank account, having your pocket money put into a bank account, you know, and then managing that. You know, there's lots of things you hear about people getting into trouble with credit cards and things like that, and teaching people, you know, like to all the pitfalls around that kind of thing. Because once you get to 18, if you've just all of a sudden you're just offered all this money and all this credit, and it can lead to loads and loads of problems later on. How many of you know how to use your washing machine? How many of you wash your own uniform? Yeah, there's a few of you, yeah. But it's things like that, practical things, how to fix things in the house, how to change a light bulb, how to mow the lawn, things, you know, they're all practical things. And obviously, as you get older, hopefully being able to afford a house, if we get young people to be able to afford a home and things like that, and managing those things and managing budgets. Do you pay for your own mobile phones out of your pocket money? Any of you? Or do you is it just a magic mobile phone that gets paid for magically every month? Right? It's things like that, and I think they're really important life skills, because as you get older and you get in employment and things like that, if you don't know how to manage those things, then it can get into lots of trouble regarding like debt and things like that. And I agree with what Robin said. I mean, the NCS, both my daughters have been on the NCS programme. It was excellent. It really helped them. They came out, and that week it was really funny. Really, but I'm trying to get them to manage the budget and things. And there was loads of arguments about what people were going to buy in a household and things like that. But it's an excellent programme for anyone to go on, and everyone can go on it. And I really advise that you do if you get the opportunity.
Thank you very much for that. Well, talking about managing budgets, and the next question from Jessica Rankin from George Stephenson High School is quite pertinent.
With the increase of university fees over years, what other options are there for students to continue their learning?
Well, that's a very good question. Tuition fees have, of course, rocketed. They're now £9,250 a year at virtually every university because they all put them up together. What other options are there for students to continue their learning? Chloe?
Don't get me started about student fees. I graduated from Newcastle Uni in 2012, so I'm 26 now, and I am just feeling the impact of my tuition fees. So my course was like £4,000 a term plus loans, so it wasn't even anywhere near as what you guys have to pay. And I'm going to be honest, I've just started earning enough to pay over the threshold, so you've got to earn a certain amount to have to pay something back. But my payments now mean that the spare money I have can't go to save for a house or pay my taxes or, and having disposable income to do things and go on holiday. So are the higher fees value for money? I don't think so, no. And that's just my personal opinion, because the jobs market in the Northeast in particular is very saturated. We struggle to retain graduates. I know a lot of my friends, most of my friends from North Tyneside have moved away to find jobs. I started my own business at 23 because I couldn't find a job in the Northeast that paid well or had progression, but also took on graduates where it wasn't like a 5-year scheme. But that's my personal journey. So for me, there is another route to learning, and whether that's an apprenticeship or work experience or enterprise agencies. So when I started my business, I worked with somebody called Project Northeast, also the Prince's Trust, which works, I think, is at 18 to 25-year-olds. And it's no longer a traditional route to learning, which I personally quite like. And I suppose maybe it might be a generation thing when we hear from the rest of the panel, I don't know. But for me, especially when I was at school, a lot of my friends went to uni because they didn't really know what else to do. They didn't really know anybody else in their family or friendship group who hadn't gone to uni and who had done well. And I think now, like I say, my brother's 24 now, so he's the youngest in our family. So it's been quite a while since we had anybody leave school and go on to college and see what they want to do. But I think in terms of apprenticeships, and especially with the business, my business, I make it so accessible to have work experience, whether you are 16 or 64. I think everybody still has learning to do, and I think those learning opportunities should be open to everybody, whether you want a career in marketing or you just want to try something different, whatever. I think that kind of the increase in university fees for some people who, yes, if you want to be a doctor or a vet, or you've got a clear vision of what you want to be. But for me, I did English literature at uni, and it was great. I did English literature, but I don't necessarily use English literature in my job today. So for me personally, I think if I was going to uni again, I would consider the increase of university fees and think, well, what else is there? Is there anything hands-on I can do, anything that's a bit cheaper? Because I'm just being honest, when I signed those forms to go to university, I didn't really think very hard about the loans that I'd have to repay. And I was like, well, it'll be 5 years' time, whatever, it'll be fine. And now I'm paying it. Whew.
Thank you very much, Chloe. Councillor Davis.
Thanks, Adrian. And again, another great question, Jessica. My daughter was one of the first to start uni with the new £9,000 fees. She's now £45,000 in debt with student fees. And as Chloe says, she's not even paying the loan back, she's paying interest. And the interest fees have gone up, so she'll never get to the end. And that's had a huge impact because the university applications have actually gone down. But I think university is a great experience, and I can't take that away from university. The experience of actually being at university. I suppose, Chloe, you would agree. It's the actual going away, managing things, and having that experience is like second to none. She says even though she's in that debt, she's so pleased she went, but it has put her off doing any other further education because she's been landed with this debt. and hopefully we'll get to a situation where we'll get a government who will reduce the fees or get rid of the fees, because I think it just what happens, it just stops that happening, and especially for like young people from lower income families and well, ordinary middle families, they're not going to university because they're having to think twice. Vocational subjects in school, I mean, there are great apprenticeships, and I agree there's some fantastic apprenticeships you can go on and work experiences, and that gives you that as well. And I think, you know, there's got to be a wide spectrum of like what you can key into and things, and you know that, you know, if there is a chance to do an apprenticeship and work on, and then as well raising achievement, the participation age is raised to 18 now, so you've still got to have some education within that apprenticeship and everything like that. And but you know, it saddens me that we're like being told by people who actually went to university for free that we have to pay this amount of university fees, and I'm hoping that eventually we'll get to a point where people start to realise that we shouldn't be burdening young people with this debt, and that we need, as well as having vocational and apprenticeships, that we need to have people going to university as well, simply to have that experience and simply to be able to expand their minds, because you get to meet other people from other areas and things like that, and it's all really valuable experiences. Yeah, I hope it gets scrapped.
I think we all hope that. Jessica, obviously you had some motivation for that. You're thinking about going to university?
Because having friends that have like had financial struggles, it's nice to know that there is other options out there, and you're not just like only have one path to go on.
Very good point. And obviously the maintenance loans that are paid to students are means tested, so people from lower income households do have the support, but obviously everybody has to pay the tuition fees, and those tuition fees are paid straight to the universities, and they are very, very steep. Right, our final scripted question of the day comes from Jasmine Singh, who's at Valley Gardens Middle School. This is a question that's going to be answered by everybody on the panel, so we'll probably go left to right or right to left. What's your question, Jasmine?
At our school, the slogan is, "What do you want to achieve?" If we turn this to you, what would your answer be?
Wow, now that really has put us on our mettle, hasn't it? So the slogan at Valley Gardens Middle School is a very good one. What do you want to achieve? And if that was actually put to the panel, what would you like to achieve? What would your answer be? Perhaps you've already achieved it. Let's start with Sergeant Foy at my left.
For me, it's all about making North Tyneside even safer. That's the reason I'm here, it's the reason the police are here, is to make you safer by whatever means, to feel safer, to be secure. That's the reason I would always want to make North Tyneside even safer. It is a very safe place, but even safer.
That's a great aspiration. That's good. I'm glad that you're setting out to achieve that. Marvellous. And Councillor Davis.
Well, I mean, to continue to serve North Tyneside, I mean, that's what I'd like to do as well. But I think politically, I'd like to, especially after being involved so heavily in this week, is to see 16 and 17-year-olds getting the vote. Because I think when I've seen the young people from Democracy Week this week, I've seen how engaged they are, and I would like to encapsulate that, so they get that chance to vote. And I think we should be seriously thinking about that now.
Indeed, and the people in the audience obviously feel that is a priority too. That's a good aspiration. What do you think? What would you like to achieve, Robin, if you haven't already achieved it?
Being here today, sorted. Jasmine, am I allowed two things? So I was at your school last week for the Valley Gardens open evening, because my daughter is likely to go to that school, and I saw the slogan. So in terms of as a parent, and based on some of the conversations and the themes of this morning, what I would like to achieve in terms of bringing up my daughter is to do some of the things you're doing, to encourage her to think for herself, to question some of the things she hears, to question some of the things she reads, and to make her own decisions and to take action on things that she feels are unjust. Professionally, so tomorrow I take on a new role at Voda as the interim chief executive, as our chief executive is off on maternity leave. And 12 years ago, I came to Voda as someone who was a little bit lost and was looking to do some volunteering, and through that support did some volunteering and have now got quite an important position in Voda. And I feel like it's my role to ensure that all of these amazing voluntary groups and charities, of which there's hundreds in North Tyneside, supported by thousands and thousands of volunteers, are able to do their best and to provide the best quality services for young people and other people in North Tyneside by working with schools, local authority groups, just to make North Tyneside an even better place to live.
Thank you very much for that. Wendy Burke, what do you want to achieve?
Okay, so on a little bit of a lighter note, people tell me that 50 is a good age as any to take stock of what you've done and where you are and what you've accomplished in your life, apparently. And so I've come across a bucket list of things that apparently I need to achieve before I die. So I'm currently working through that list of 50 things, and I've got to tell you, some of the things on that list are not as appealing as others. So there's things like go skydiving, get a tattoo, tell somebody what you really think of them. Yeah, those sorts of things. But actually, what I'd really like to achieve personally is I would really like to be able to ski a black run from the very top to the very bottom without stopping. And I've yet to achieve that, so that's on my list. But I think my key message to you in the audience today is aim high, set your ambitions high, aim for the stars.
Very good. I like that. I like those aspirations that you've got there. Councillor Hodson, you've probably already achieved all of those things.
Yeah. When I was the age of this audience, I really never gave this thought. It wasn't the thought process in those days. I left school in 1955, 10 years after the Second World War, in the middle of the Cold War, and I don't think people really looked to the future, quite honestly, then. They were happy to be alive that day. But I do recall that at one stage I wanted to be an apprentice at the Hawker Siddeley factory in Kingston, where they made the Hawker Hunter fighter jet aircraft. I'd love to be an apprentice there, but that didn't happen. I joined the aerodynamics division of the National Physical Laboratory, and later on won a scholarship to Manchester University and studied mechanical engineering. These things tend to happen without me actually steering them. However, had I thought more about the future, I would have thought about the things I like doing at school and like doing out of school, things I was good at, and I was good at mathematics and physics and history and painting and drawing. I would love to have been an architect, and I think the pleasure of being a creative producer, like an architect, creative designer and so on, would be to look at what you've achieved later on. And once, a few years ago, I took a boat trip down the Thames as it comes into the centre of London, and you look there and you see the magnificent buildings, some old, some new there, and I would love to have been part of that. So I'd love to have been an architect.
I'm sure there's still time for that, Councillor Hodson. But that's a great aspiration. Chloe, what do you want to achieve?
Well, first up, tips to Wendy, tattoos aren't that painful. This question for me, it was a funny one because I sometimes get in trouble for my ambitions and what I want to achieve. Start a business, tick. Work with XYZ, tick. And I was having a bit of a meltdown to my mum the other day because I recently changed the status of my business to a limited company, which meant I didn't know that mortgage advisors wouldn't look at you. Anyway, so I had a whole kind of strop of like, well, I'm going to have to take 2 years to do this. And my mum was like, Chloe, why have you got to achieve everything so quickly? What's the rush? You know, why are you thinking about this so much? And truthfully, I couldn't give her an answer. What I would have said to you about a year ago is, what do I want to achieve? Nice car, house, designer handbags. And I'm a little bit embarrassed to say that in front of you now because none of that actually makes you very happy. It doesn't. And I think, in truth, what I would like to achieve is good mental and physical health. And what does that look like? So for me, a work-life balance. So not necessarily working myself 7 days a week to achieve something before I'm 27, or, you know, self-esteem and self-confidence. So this is something that, I mean, I'm not going to lie, I struggle with all the time. You know, I think, oh, can I do that? Can I pitch for that piece of work? Can I sit in front of you today and just be me? And, you know, silly things like that, you always think, oh my. So for me, what I'd like to achieve is to, even though you might still be scared to do something, have the faith in yourself to go and do it. So suddenly success and failure doesn't actually matter. It doesn't matter if you succeed at it or if you fail. It's just having the balls to try it. So that's what I would like to achieve.
Well, that all sounds very good. My two daughters went to Marden High School and then on to Whitley Bay High School. And when they were at Marden, the slogan was Carpe Diem, seize the day. Is that still the slogan at Marden High School? Yes, excellent. Glad to see it. We all learn our first Latin at Marden High School. Some brilliant questions there. As you know, this has been an ongoing debate on Twitter as well, and there have been questions that have been on the Twitter stream, and we've chosen one to bat about. It may be that I have to just ask the councillors this question, but it may well go further. So a question posed by Jack Newton. I'm not sure which school he's from. Is Jack Newton here? Oh, brilliant. Jack's actually in the room. Brilliant. Let's get a microphone to Jack if we can, unless he's got a very loud voice. Which school do you come from, Jack?
Marden.
Marden, there you are. Carpe diem. Right, ask us your question then, Jack, and I'm going to put it to the two councillors initially. And they don't know what the question is.
I don't know, asking a few questions.
Right, this is the question you posed. This is the question you posed about Brexit.
Oh yeah. What's the council going to do to prepare for the cliff edge of Brexit? I think.
Yeah, that's exactly how you phrased it. So, what is the council doing to prepare